Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Everything Podcast. Cam is out this week, but we have a special guest on this week's episode who you have not heard on the podcast before, but I can say with assurance that this will not be his last appearance here on the Everything Podcast. We've got Daniel joining us this week. Daniel,
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here. How are you doing?
I am doing great. I am a little bit nervous with all the events going on, but so far it's been going great. I'm looking forward to being back someday, as well as this own episode. So, how are you doing, Will?
I am doing great, Daniel. I am excited for today's episode because we just have a number of riveting topics to discuss, and there are going to be a couple other things that we're going to discuss today, but there's truly only one place that is appropriate to start because it's the biggest thing that happened in America all week, and that is the election of Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump that Donald Trump obviously won both the popular vote and the electoral vote, which is an improvement over his victory in 2016 when he won the electoral vote but did not get the popular vote. And I just want to start this election conversation by saying the path to getting the final result on who our next president is going to be has been really unlike anything I've seen in politics, at least in my lifetime. Early this year, Donald Trump was found guilty on 34 felony charges. Then there were 2 assassination attempts against him this year. Earlier in the year, we had a whole different person running for president for the Democratic Party in Joe Biden. He steps down. Kamala Harris steps in. She has to choose a running mate. They have to have the shortest campaign in political history, unless there's something before my lifetime that I'm not aware of. But just thinking about all that led up to this election, Trump being found guilty on 34 felony charges, 2 assassination attempts against him, Biden steps down, Harris has to step in and run an extremely short campaign. This has truly been an unprecedented election in terms of the events that led up to us finally getting a result earlier this week.
Yeah, and I think a huge part of this is just what people have images of what he's going to do, not the reality of what he has done. Especially another example of is at school, there was some people saying, I appeal to his business side of things, but that just shows they're never going to get rich, because you realize that business is caring about yourself and the people that will make you rich. And obviously, that does not apply to a whole country. Unless suddenly a country makes him rich. Well, but then you also have his acts of, well, just disgust, in my opinion. He beat 2 women. He was demonstrating inappropriate behavior on stage. And also during a campaign event, he just started listening to music and dancing. Of all the ridiculous things, versus maybe some mistakes on Kamala's end of some talking, especially that one comment about the military being inactive. But that is a mistake. We all make mistakes, and yet whenever he makes one, it's just like, oh yeah, but whenever Kamala makes one, it seems you just jump on it right away. But that's just how it seems to me. How about you, Will?
Yeah, I mean, if I had to, and I think we could spend an entire podcast breaking down all the different reasons that led to Trump's victory, but here I think are some of the big ones and what I think this really comes down to. On one hand, Joe Biden was not a popular president, and Kamala Harris was his vice president for the last 4 years. So the fact that she was somebody from the Biden administration, which was not a popular administration, I think was not, something that was going well for her. And I think if she had separated herself from the Biden administration and talking about what she would do if she had become president, I think possibly if she had been stronger there, she could have had a better chance of winning. But beyond that, I think what this ultimately comes down to is this. Has Donald Trump, done things that we've never seen from a presidential candidate before, including saying that an election was rigged? Absolutely. But I truly think what this election comes down to is that the people who voted for him, I truly believe that in their minds they said, okay, maybe some of his behavior is questionable, but the country was better under him because of things like the economy being better and prices being lower. And I think ultimately that was enough for people to decide to put in a vote for him, despite all of his questionable actions. And beyond that, this is a point that I've heard, recently, and I think it's an interesting one. People have, jobs and they are busy in their daily lives, and people might not have time to sit down and watch every single Kamala Harris rally speech or every single Donald Trump rally speech. And they might be voting just off of a little bit of research they've done online of this is what her policies are, this is what his policies are, instead of actually taking the time to listen to what they're actually saying to the American people in their speeches. But, I think there are so many, other things, we could get into in terms of why Donald Trump is our 47th president. But I just think at the end of the day, people genuinely thought that the country was better under him in certain ways. And that's why they're voting for him, despite, things like him being found guilty on 34 felony charges.
Yeah, and one thing that I think it's a bit selfish of me, but the thing is, I can completely relate. We all have this one selfish part that wants the best for us, no matter the consequences, and that is what I kind of see Mr. 47, our 47th president, Mr. Donald Trump, doing. So he kind of just does everything for himself, but he does it in a way that makes people think that he's also going to make it easier on their lives. So he's bringing out people's selfish desires in a way they don't have to really show it in public. And they love that, and it's just, who wouldn't want a world better for themselves instead of a world better for everybody? And that is another huge thing I think had people in the minds people had to deal with. So that's just my thoughts. Any others finishing up, wrapping this subject?
Yeah, I think that there's, so much we could get into, but just, a couple things I'll say here is, look, Joe Biden won the last election, so it's clear that some people who voted for Joe Biden in 2020 decided to switch parties and vote for Donald Trump here in 2024, but I just feel that, on one hand, I'm like, okay, maybe there are some things that Kamala Harris could have done better. But on another hand, I'm like, I don't think anything she could have said or done would have changed the outcome of this election from the standpoint of, I believe that Donald Trump has a base solidified behind him, and they are going to listen to what he says and believe what he says no matter what. And no matter what Kamala Harris says, they are steadfast in what they believe, and they're going to vote for him no matter what. And I think that's, the same on the Harris side of things too. I think there are people who are really not a fan of Donald Trump, and nothing was going to make them change their minds. So, I think there were, some people who switched who they voted for in 2020 versus 2024, but I also think, a big part of why there's divide in this country right now is I just think there are people on both sides who are, who are, very fixated on, what they think, and they just kind of can't even listen to what the other side says. And I think you especially see that with Trump supporters. I think no matter what Kamala Harris says, they just have a set image of who Donald Trump is, and they're going to listen to him and believe him no matter what. And, another thought I have, Daniel, this is just something right in front of me that I cannot ignore because it's just sitting right there. The one person who beat Donald Trump was a white man named Joe Biden. The two people that he has, the one person he lost to was Joe Biden. The two people he has beaten were women, Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris. And I gotta be honest, because that evidence is sitting smack dab right in front of me here, and right in front of us, and right in front of the American people, to me it begs the question, are we ready for a female president? And I feel like the answer might still be no.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous at this point, and it's literally, this might be ironic for some people watching, that we, as adults, are just fighting like toddlers. No matter what you do, kids, they won't change their mind. They'll think they've done the right thing. And if they don't, it's rather obvious. And you can make them, and you try to make them know that they've done the wrong thing, and when they do realize that and don't do it again, you can congratulate yourself because you did a good job. But then, when you're adults, nobody's stopping you from arguing like children, and we're letting that get to our heads, and nobody is taking the time to look at both sides of the argument and see what will be better for humanity. They just decide, well, I'm right and nobody else is, unless they agree with me. It's like a quote from Donald Trump is, didn't he say something along the lines of, if you don't like me, I hate you, or something?
Yeah, he is quoted for saying, I don't like people who don't like me.
Exactly, and that is just a bad mental to take for everything. Because when you can't know somebody until you spend time with them, you can think you know somebody from the stories they've experienced, but you just have an image of what you would be like from their experiences, not what they are like from their experiences.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying about, really both sides being so fixated on their opinion and I'm the one who's right and not being able to listen to the other side, I think that is a big part of why there is divide in this country right now. And as much as I would like to say we're going to have unity going forward, now I can say for a fact that there will not be January 6th happening again. Kamala Harris and her supporters will not be having something like that happen. But as much as I would like to say, well, now that, the result of this election is here, unity is going to emerge again, and we're going to be able to solve our political divides here in this country. As sad as it is for me to say this, I don't see that happening because I believe we have two sides who are just so polar opposite in their views right now, and I believe Donald Trump is a political figure who is spreading a message of anybody who is against what we believe in and thinks differently than what we believe in is the enemy from within. They are not to be trusted. They are not to be liked. I believe that is the message he is spreading. And as much as I hate to say it, in terms of a path to being able to solve our political divides and have unity in this country again and being able to sit down at the dinner table and have conversations even with two different opinions, I don't see a path to that right now because of the type of political figure that Donald Trump is.
Yeah, it's kind of sad to see because, like Neil deGrasse Tyson, you say, people say we're the smartest things on Earth, which on Earth, yes, but if, let's say you come out of here, alien comes, they've managed to get the whole space and time thing and come over to us, and what they see on Earth is people fighting, having wars, killing each other, and then they'll go back and say, no, we do not have a smart civilization on this planet. And that, to me, was really eye-opening when he said that, because when you realize that people are still going out on the streets and having to fight is for the right thing or the wrong thing, is ridiculous. And when people can just agree on something, it really just is good. And when everyone can agree with each other no matter what and find solutions, that is when this country and this universe is saved.
Yeah, and that I definitely think is what is going to need to happen if we, as American people, want to solve the political divide that is so clearly between us right now. And wrapping up this conversation, and Daniel, feel free to share any final points that you have too. But one final thing I would like to get to in this election conversation, because I believe it's just another extremely important aspect of this election here in 2024 is the polls. We've seen things in the past where Hillary Clinton was up by a lot in the polls and she ended up losing to Donald Trump, obviously not by the popular vote, but by the electoral vote, which gave Donald Trump the opportunity to be the 45th president of the United States. And I look at the election this year, and listen, when Joe Biden was the candidate, especially following his June debate against Donald Trump, Trump was leading in the polls, and people were losing support in Biden. There was a whole Democratic Party freak out, people asking for him to step down, and it was Trump's leading in the polls. He's the one favored to win this election. Then Biden steps down, Harris steps in, Harris starts leading in the polls. There's tremendous enthusiasm behind her campaign. It looks like she's going to win. Then the polls basically become a deadlock. They're tied. This is anybody's game. We don't know who's going to win the election. And then election night comes, and Donald Trump wins pretty easily. There was really no doubt that he was going to be the one to win the election. And I'm not saying that I don't believe all the negativity surrounding Joe Biden when he was a candidate, and I'm not saying that there wasn't enthusiasm behind Kamala Harris's campaign, because I believe there was. But when I see things like, oh, the polls are tied, this is anybody's race, and then Donald Trump winning pretty decisively on election night, it to me begs the question, can we trust the polls anymore, and is anything they said truly accurate? And I have a hard time saying yes to that right now. I believe we need to have a serious conversation about if polls can be trusted around elections anymore.
Yes, it's definitely a concerning topic. It's the polls. It's hard to say. It's like, it's in the end, it's the government has to balance people so people don't get too angry, because a big thing the government has to balance is they want the least amount of violence, because once that happens, and we've seen it before, the French Revolution, the American Revolution, all the revolutions, of people getting angry, and, well, a war starts. And that is something Americans fighting Americans would be disastrous. We, by far, have the largest guns. We have, I think, by last record I remember, 120 guns per 100 people in the United States. And if that doesn't show you how disastrous a war would be within the United States, it can show you. And that really shows the government is just not showing you what is realistic. They're showing you what you want to see and what both sides can stand without going berserk. And we've already had one White House rampage.
Yeah, well, unless you have anything else to add on this, Daniel, I must say this has been a riveting political conversation. I mean, if there's one positive aspect of these U.S. elections, it's that the conversations that it can bring about are truly riveting, I feel. And I just want to say to all of our listeners and viewers, you are welcome to disagree with anything that Daniel and I just said. We welcome disagreements on this podcast. We think it's important to be able to express our differences and have conversations about them, even if we're not on the same side. So I just want to say, and I'm sure Daniel will agree, we welcome disagreement to any of the points that we just made regarding the 2024 election. But I personally thoroughly enjoyed having this conversation, because I think of all topics, from 2024, it's hard to get more riveting than this election because it truly did feel like such a big one. Any other points you have to make on this topic, Daniel?
No, I think we are ready to move on.
All right, well, let us go ahead and move on. And obviously the election was definitely the biggest thing that happened in this country this week, but there are other things going on throughout the United States of America as well that are important to touch on. And one is a little NBA basketball, and Daniel and I are big Golden State Warriors fans, and obviously Cam is a big Celtics fan, and the Warriors and Celtics played on Wednesday night, and it was a super close game, but the Warriors won in the end. And when I'm looking at this NBA season so far, Daniel, I truly believe that there are 5 teams who have distinguished themselves as above everybody else in the league. And that would be the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are undefeated, the Boston Celtics, out in the Eastern Conference, and then out in the Western Conference, the Oklahoma City Thunder, Phoenix Suns, and Golden State Warriors. If you go on to ESPN and look at the standings for the Eastern and Western Conferences, it's those 2 teams in the East and those 3 teams in the West, and then everybody else is just not on those 5 teams' level in terms of the quality of their record. So we'll see how this season pans out, and we still have a number of months left before the play-in tournament and the playoffs and all that. But so far, Daniel, I see 5 teams that have clearly established themselves above the rest of the league.
Yes, I completely agree, especially going in the game tonight, one of, as we've established, a top 5 versus supposedly the best team in the league right now, Warriors versus Cavs. That will be an interesting one, since the Warriors, they did struggle and end up losing to the Clippers, which right now do not have to say the least, the best of records. And all I can say to that is they have a new team. They've been working out things. Wiggins last year was nowhere to be seen. Payton last year was, also, as usual, got a bunch of injuries. And this year, so far, it's looking a lot better. Sure, Wiggins, has he returned to his 2022 self? No, but he's been decent. So, same with Gary Payton Jr. Curry's been doing all right, even after the ankle injury. Draymond's been doing great. Draymond, he hasn't been getting too much text yet, which has been nice. And besides that, I'd love to see the stuff from Heel. Heel's been doing fabulous, and by far my favorite pickup. And then Melton's been had some injuries. I think last thing they said they have a back injury of some sort. And I'm just really excited to see these next 2 games, since for me, these 2 games will decide the Warriors' season.
Yeah, these next 2 games are definitely utterly pivotal for the Golden State Warriors, at least from the standpoint of if they want to make a statement that they're true title contenders, because in terms of teams that have had great starts to the season, the Cleveland Cavaliers and Oklahoma City Thunder are definitely 2 of those teams, and the Warriors beat the Celtics, and they got a statement win there, but they got a chance to get 2 more statement wins in their upcoming 2 games, but, listen, I didn't think the Warriors had a bad offseason. I thought they had 3 good pickups in Buddy Hield, DeAnthony Melton, and Kyle Anderson. But going into this season, I was like, this team just does not have a clear number 2 scorer behind Steph Curry. I was just like, this feels like a play-in tournament team to me and nothing else. And let me just say this. The play-in tournament, despite the Warriors' great start, I'm still keeping that as my goal for this Warriors season. Could it change over time? Sure, but that's still my goal right now. That being said, I have been beyond pleasantly surprised by the start for the Warriors. Did I think they could be good? Yes, but did I expect a team that was playing like one of the best teams in basketball and a potential title contender? Absolutely not. And that is why I just love what I'm seeing from this Warriors team so far. And even though I think there's a lot to like from a bunch of players, to me, Buddy Hield is the story of this season. He's been the perfect Klay Thompson replacement. I feel he has taken that number 2 scorer role, basically locked in for at least 20 points a night. I mean, I know he only had, I believe, 16 against the Celtics, but besides that, that guy seems locked into it to, at minimum, 20 points a night for me. And Steph Curry hasn't had a 30-point game, but he hasn't had to. And he was even injured, and they were still winning despite that. So we'll see how the rest of this season plays out. I'm not going to get too ahead of myself because it's still early on, and there is a chance that they'll lose to the Cavaliers and the Thunder and bring us back to reality a bit. But I believe there is nothing not to love about the Warriors' start to the season so far, and if they keep playing at this level, they are going to be dangerous.
I completely agree, and this might be a bit biased as a Warriors fan, as sure a lot of you see this as, especially from the East Coast with the Celtics, but for me, I'm looking back and seeing a 2022 version, but as Will said, I cannot keep my hopes up at all because what we saw last year was definitely a reality check of how all over the place this team will be. So right now, I'm in completely agreement with Will. I'm keeping my expectations to an in-tournament season game or team. So that is my hope. And if I was being ballsy, I would say hopefully they win the in-season tournament. But that is definitely a bit of a lofty dream right there. I am sticking to what Will said and hoping for the best, especially with Heel. He's been one of my favorite players on the Warriors teams for especially now. It's like he just shot up there. It's like I've heard of him kind of, but I never really knew his name until now. And I honestly thought Melton was gonna be the better pickup. But with the injuries, so far, Heel is definitely the second scorer, and I'm completely fine with that. And I love the fact that Curry has not even needed to get a 30-point game. It's crazy when you consider how a all-time shooter in a 7-1 record in the beginning of the season after a pretty bad season last season just doesn't even have to carry to get a good record. So that is definitely a huge hope for the entire Warriors team.
For sure. And, depth has been something that the Warriors have displayed a ton so far this season, and there's really no greater example of that than Steph Curry being injured and they're still winning, and Steph Curry not even having a 30-point game, but not having a 30-point game because he hasn't had to have a 30-point game. Really no better attribute to the Warriors' depth than that. And I know that the Warriors-Cavs game probably will have already happened, but by the time that this podcast comes out, maybe it will have been a blowout, but I really don't think so, given how well the Warriors have played so far this season. But hey, even if they do lose the game, that'll still be a 7-2 start, and they'll have a chance to make another statement win against OKC. So no matter what happens, win or loss in the Warriors-Cavs game, just a terrific and very hopeful and very encouraging and surprising in the best way possible start to this season for the Golden State Warriors. And, yeah.
Now moving on, going to Venom: The Last Dance, the most recent Marvel movie coming out. What are your thoughts on that so far?
Yeah, so, I remember watching the first two Venom movies, Venom the original from 2018, and Venom Let There Be Carnage at your house. I remember you were the person who I watched those movies with for the first time, and I liked them. I enjoyed them for what they were. Now, there are certain things where I feel like I would enjoy them when I was younger, but now that I'm older, I might have a bit of a different perspective. And as I sat back and reflected, and based off of how bad the reviews tend to be for Venom movies, I was like, if I watch these movies again, would I not be wild about them? I wasn't sure, and I saw the trailers for Venom: The Last Dance, and that didn't blow me away, so I didn't go in with very high expectations to the movie. And listen, do I think this movie is anywhere near Avengers Endgame Elite Marvel level? Absolutely not. But just like with the Warriors, it pleasantly surprised me. I don't think it's a great film, but I thought they did a pretty solid job with it, and I found endearing moments at multiple points throughout the movie. And when Venom and I do want to issue a spoiler warning here, but when Venom and Eddie Brock have to separate at the end of the film, and Memories by Maroon 5 came on, it was hard to not have that just hit you right in the gut, because they made you care about those two characters throughout the film. So I by no means am declaring this a great Sony anti-hero Marvel movie, but I can say that it pleasantly surprised me, and I found endearing moments throughout the film in ways I never would have expected to see.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the better Venom movies that I've seen. The first one was definitely, I personally thoroughly enjoyed it. Was there times that I thought it could be better? Of course, but you can't have every Marvel movie be an Endgame movie. It unfortunately does not work that way, so in the end, it was a solid movie. The same with the second Venom movie, Let There Be Carnage. I enjoyed it. Did I think it was as good as the first one? Not particularly, but it was still a solid movie. And the same with the third one. They just seem to repeat solid movie after solid movie, which I think is a good one. Should I think there be another Venom movie just about Venom in their self? I don't think so, but do I like the possibilities of a Spider-Man 4 with Venom and symbiotes? Absolutely. Do I want to see the same repeating story of how Spider-Man turns bad? No. That I do not want to see. That would just be a complete retake of a different Spider-Man and put it in another Spider-Man's shoes. And I would find that completely unoriginal and tasteless.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. And just in terms of a bit of a bigger picture question about Venom, obviously Venom seems to be liked by the fans, but not so much by the critics. Venom: The Last Dance not doing as well, at least in the US box office, than the other two Venom movies. But let's look into the future here, maybe 20, 30 years down the line. Many years from now, how do you think these films are going to be remembered?
Well, that's a hard question to ask, because it really depends on Marvel's future. Will they crash? Or will they continue succeeding? Because let's say they crash. People are probably going to remember the great ones like Endgame, Infinity War, and Iron Man series, and all those things leading up to those. And just to say, I would completely agree, because that's Marvel's disappeared. They're not making anything more. The great ones, No Way Home, of course, Multiverse of Madness, those I can see getting remembered. But the more fan-exclusive ones, people probably won't remember those as much, like the Venom ones have been, especially. Because the fans obviously have taken a liking to Venom, the character, and obviously, including me. I love Venom, and Eddie Brock especially. But do I think they'll be remembered if Marvel crashes? No. But if they're still going at the same rate, I think that the critics and everybody will remember them and look back in their history and have a fond memory of a childhood or something and say, why not put it on again?
Yeah, and even if it's not gonna, be remembered on the level of, let's say, Iron Man for example, it does seem like there'll be at least some Marvel fans who will always have a soft spot for Venom. That is at least what I hope after this third movie. That pleasantly surprised me. Daniel really enjoyed it too. And on that note, that is going to wrap up this episode of the Everything Podcast. Daniel, thank you so much for joining me. Would love to have you on again. And anything you want to say to finish this up?
It was great talking about it. I think especially with the election, it's been looming over everybody's minds. It was then the Warriors. Always fun to have a nice chat about those. Venom: The Last Dance. Marvel movies have been coming out at a rapid pace. Doesn't look like they're slowing down anytime soon. So it's good to get them out of the way. And I'm just glad to be here. It's fun talking. My first time on this podcast might have been on a heavy subject, but thoroughly enjoyed it, and I am ready to come back anytime soon.
Awesome. Well, it was great to have you on. We would definitely love to have you on again. Cam and I will be back next week. I have, just so many things I look forward to talking about in upcoming episodes of the Everything Podcast. So many riveting topics out there to discuss. Can't wait to talk about them all. Can't wait to have Daniel back on the podcast again sometime soon. Hope everybody has a fantastic weekend, and we will see you on the next episode of the Everything Podcast.